I walked out of my HQ into a blizzard. I saw a 7-year-old girl shivering, holding a letter. I recognized the handwriting. It was my daughter-in-law's. By the time that letter was fully open, I would learn that the dead don't always stay buried.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
My son swore they had died in childbirth 7 years ago to keep the trust fund for himself. The girl looked at me and delivered the message. I put her in my limo and told Marcus, my driver, to turn the heat up all the way. The child didn't speak. She just sat there, trembling, her lips blue, her coat too thin for January in Toledo. I could see her ribs through the fabric when she breathed. Her shoes had holes in them. The snow had soaked through to her socks. "What's your name?" I asked. She looked at me with eyes that reminded me of someone. I couldn't place it yet. She held out the envelope with both hands, like it was something fragile. The handwriting on the front stopped my heart. Neat, looping letters. Caroline's handwriting. The woman who died 7 years ago giving birth to a baby who also died. At least that's what Ethan told me. That's what the death certificate said. That's what I believed until this exact moment. I took the envelope. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold. "Where did you get this?" I asked the girl. She pointed at herself. Then she pointed at the letter. I tore it open. The paper was old, creased, like it had been folded and unfolded many times. The date at the top said January 14th, 2018, 7 years ago, 2 weeks after Caroline supposedly died. "Shirley, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to let Lily find you. I'm alive. The baby is alive. Her name is Lily. She's yours. She has your husband's eyes. Ethan didn't tell you the truth. There was no hemorrhage. There was no emergency. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl at Toledo General on December 28, 2017, at 11:43 p.m. Ethan was there. He held her. He smiled. Then he told me what would happen if I didn't leave. He said if I didn't disappear, you'd never see your granddaughter alive. He said he'd make sure of it. He said you'd never believe me anyway. He said the trust fund was his, and he wasn't going to let a child ruin that. I was 32 years old, Shirley. I had no family, no money, no way to fight him, so I took the baby, and I left. He gave me $5,000 and told me if I ever contacted you, if I ever tried to come back, he'd have me declared unfit. He'd take Lily. He'd put her in foster care where I'd never find her. I believed him. I still believe him. But Lily deserves to know you. She deserves to know she has a grandmother who would have loved her. So I'm sending her to you with this letter. I'm trusting you to protect her from him. He's been paying me $800 a month to stay quiet. It comes from an account I don't recognize. I think it's your money. I think he's been stealing from you this whole time. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fight him 7 years ago. I'm sorry I let him take away your granddaughter, but I'm trying to be strong now. Please don't let him hurt her. Caroline." I read the letter 3 times. Then I looked at the girl, Lily, my granddaughter, 7 years old, shivering in a limousine while I processed the fact that my son had lied to me about the most important thing in the world. "Lily," I said. My voice sounded strange. "Where's your mother?" She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. It was a napkin with an address written in marker. 1847 Pinewood Avenue, apartment 4C. "Is she there now?" Lily nodded. I looked at Marcus through the partition. 1847 Pinewood Avenue. He nodded and pulled out into the blizzard. I tried to think, tried to make sense of this. Ethan had stood in my living room 7 years ago, crying. I remembered the exact date, January 3rd, 2018. He came to my house at 6:02 in the morning. His eyes were red. His voice was broken. "Mom," he said, "they didn't make it. Neither of them." I held him while he sobbed. I made him tea. I called the funeral home. I paid for everything. I chose the caskets, 2 white caskets, one large, one impossibly small. I stood at the cemetery in February and watched them lower both into the ground. I put flowers on the graves every month for 7 years. There were death certificates. I saw them. Caroline Ann Beaumont, age 32. Cause of death, postpartum hemorrhage. Baby girl Beaumont, stillborn. I kept those certificates in a folder in my desk drawer. I looked at them sometimes when I missed them. when I wondered what Lily would have looked like. Now the real Lily was sitting next to me, wearing a coat that was too thin and shoes that were falling apart. "Are you hungry?" I asked. She nodded. "When did you eat last?" She held up 2 fingers. 2 hours ago? She shook her head, held up the fingers again, pointed at the window, pointed at the sky getting dark. 2 days ago? She nodded. I felt something crack inside my chest, something that had been holding steady for 67 years. Marcus pulled up in front of a building that looked like it should have been condemned. The paint was peeling. The windows on the first floor were boarded up. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. "Stay in the car," I told Lily. "I'll be right back." I stepped out into the snow. My shoes weren't made for this weather. I was wearing a suit from a board meeting that ended 3 hours ago. The wind cut through my coat like it wasn't there. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled like mold and something burnt. Apartment 4C had a number hanging sideways on the door. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. "Caroline," I called. "It's Shirley. I have Lily." I heard movement inside. Footsteps. Then the door opened. The woman standing in front of me looked like Caroline, but she looked different too. Thinner. Older. Her hair was shorter. She had a scar on her forehead that hadn't been there 7 years ago. "Shirley," she whispered. "You're alive," I said. She started crying. Not loud crying, quiet crying, the kind that comes from someone who's been holding it in for too long. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." I stepped inside. The apartment was small. 1 room with a kitchen in the corner, a mattress on the floor, a space heater that wasn't working. The temperature inside was barely warmer than outside. "How long have you been living like this?" I asked. "Since I left the hospital. 7 years. Yes." I looked around. There were drawings on the wall. Children's drawings. A woman with gray hair. That was me. A little girl holding the woman's hand. That was Lily. That was the grandmother she'd never met, drawn from a photograph Caroline must have kept. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me? He said you'd believe him over me. He said you'd think I was lying. He said he'd take Lily and I'd never see her again. And you believed him. I had no reason not to. He's your son, Shirley. You love him. Why would you believe some woman he barely knew for 2 years? She was right. I would have believed Ethan. I would have thought Caroline was disturbed, having some kind of breakdown. I would have called the police. I would have helped Ethan take Lily away from her." "He's been paying you," I said. $800 a month. It's not enough. I work 3 jobs. I clean offices at night. I stock shelves at a grocery store. I walk dogs on weekends. Lily stays with a neighbor when I'm gone. I can't afford daycare. I thought about the trust fund. $4.2 million. Money my late husband worked 40 years to save. Money that was supposed to take care of our family. Money that was supposed to make sure our grandchildren had everything they needed. Ethan was the trustee. He managed the accounts. He sent me reports every quarter. "Everything always looked fine." "The money he's been paying you," I said. "It's from the trust, isn't it?" Caroline nodded. "I think so. The account name is Beaumont Family Holdings. That was the trust. Ethan had been stealing from the family trust to pay off the mother of his child. The child he told me was dead. The child whose funeral I paid for. I need to see the records," I said. "Everything. Every payment he's made to you." Caroline opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. Inside were bank statements going back 7 years. Every month, the same amount. $800. Sometimes it came on the 1st. Sometimes it came on the 15th. Once it came on the 23rd. And there was a note in the memo line. "Late because of audit." "Did he ever threaten you again?" I asked. "After that first time?" "Once a year. Every January. He comes to wherever I'm living. He reminds me what will happen if I talk to you. He brings papers for me to sign. Something about waiving parental rights. I never sign them. He gets angry. Then he leaves." I looked at the dates on the statements. Every January. Like clockwork. "When did he come this year?" I asked. "Yesterday." "What did he say?" Caroline's voice got quieter. "He said you're getting old. He said you've been forgetting things. He said if I tried to contact you now, no one would believe you anyway. Everyone would think you were confused. I felt rage building in my chest. Cold rage. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that calculates. I'm 67 years old, I said. I run a company with 240 employees. I have 4 board meetings a month. I negotiate contracts worth millions of dollars. My mind is perfectly clear. I know, Caroline said. But he's been setting something up. I can feel it. He's planning something. What did you tell him? I told him to leave. I told him I was done. That's why I sent Lily to find you today. I figured if he was going to do something, I'd rather face it head on than keep hiding. I looked at this woman who'd spent 7 years in poverty to protect my granddaughter. This woman who'd been threatened and paid off and silenced. Pack your things, I said. Both of you. You're coming with me. Surely I don't care what he'll do. You're not staying here. Lily's not staying here. I took out my phone, called Margaret Unser, my CFO, the only person in the company I trusted completely. Margaret, I said when she answered, I need you to pull every record we have on the Beaumont Family Trust. Every transaction, every transfer, every payment, going back 7 years. That's a lot of documents, Margaret said. What am I looking for? Theft, I said. There was a pause. I'll have it on your desk by tomorrow morning, she said. I hung up, looked at Caroline. Get Lily, I said. We're leaving. Where are we going? My house. The house Ethan grew up in. The house he's going to wish he never lied about. Caroline and Lily moved into my guest bedroom that night. I gave them clean towels, warm clothes, and soup from the kitchen. Lily ate 3 bowls. She still didn't speak, but she looked at me differently now. Less afraid, more curious. I didn't sleep. I sat in my office with the door closed, looking at 7 years of trust fund statements that Margaret had delivered at 6 a.m. She'd worked through the night. The numbers told a story I didn't want to believe. $800 per month to Caroline. That was $67,200 over 7 years. But that wasn't all. There were other payments, labeled consulting fees and legal services and property maintenance. All going to accounts I didn't recognize. All authorized by Ethan as trustee. Margaret had highlighted the suspicious ones in yellow. There were 43 of them. Total, $387,000. I picked up my phone, put it down, picked it up again. I needed to be smart about this. If I confronted Ethan now, he'd have time to cover his tracks. He'd destroy evidence. He'd create new stories. He'd make me look like the confused old woman he was already telling people I was. I called Margaret instead. I need a forensic accountant, I said. Someone who specializes in trust fund fraud. Someone who can testify in court if necessary. I know someone, Margaret said. David Rosen. He worked on the Patterson estate case 3 years ago. Recovered $800,000. Get him on the phone, Margaret called back in 20 minutes. David Rosen could see me that afternoon. His rate was $450 per hour. I told him to send the bill. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:15, again at 9:30. At 9:45, he showed up at my office. My assistant, Rachel, knocked on my door. Mrs. Beaumont, your son is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. Tell him I'm in a meeting. He said he'll wait. Of course he would. I opened the door. Ethan was standing in the reception area, wearing the charcoal suit I'd bought him last Christmas. He looked calm, too calm. Mom, he said, we need to talk. I'm busy. It won't take long. I let him into my office, closed the door, didn't offer him a seat. What do you want? I asked. I heard you called Margaret at midnight last night, asked her to pull trust fund records. I kept my face neutral. Who told you that? Margaret did. She copied me on the email. I'm the trustee, remember? I have to be notified of any audit requests. I'd forgotten that. Ethan had insisted on that clause when the trust was set up. He'd said it was to protect against fraud. I'd thought it made sense at the time. I'm reviewing the accounts, I said. That's my right. Of course it is. I'm just wondering why. Is something wrong? Should something be wrong? He smiled. The same smile he'd used as a child when he was lying about breaking a lamp or stealing cookies. No, everything's fine. The trust is performing well. Returns are up 8% this year. Good to know. So why the sudden interest? I'm 67 years old, Ethan. I want to make sure everything is in order. Everything is in order. Then you have nothing to worry about. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, looked out at the snow still falling. Mom, he said, are you feeling okay? I'm fine. You seem stressed, distracted. Rachel said you've been here since 6 a.m. I had work to do. You're working too hard. At your age, you should be slowing down, delegating more. You've earned it. At your age, the words hung in the air like smoke. I'll slow down when I'm ready, I said. I worry about you. You're here all the time. You barely eat. Margaret told me you forgot about the quarterly board meeting last month. That was a lie. I hadn't forgotten anything. Margaret said no such thing. She mentioned it to me in confidence. She's worried too. I felt my pulse quicken. He was building something, creating a narrative. I need to get back to work, I said. Of course. But Mom, if you ever need help managing things, you know I'm here. The trust, the company, your personal accounts. I can take care of all of it. You shouldn't have to carry this burden alone. There it was. The offer made to sound like kindness. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, I said. I know you are. I'm just saying, if that ever changes, I'm here. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. By the way, he said, I drove past the house this morning. I saw lights on in the guest room. Do you have company? My blood went cold. A friend is staying with me for a few days. Anyone I know? No. That's nice. You should have company more often. It's not good for you to be alone in that big house. He left. I sat down at my desk. My hands were shaking. He knew. He didn't know exactly what I knew, but he knew something was happening. At 2 p.m., I met with David Rosen. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. He spread the trust fund statements across my conference table and studied them for 45 minutes without saying a word. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Beaumont, he said, do you know what structuring is? No, it's a technique people use to hide financial transactions. They break up large amounts into smaller payments to avoid detection. Your son has been structuring payments out of the trust fund for 7 years to pay off Caroline. Among other things, there are payments to 12 different accounts. Some of them are shell companies. Some are registered to addresses that don't exist. One is registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. How much? So far, I've found $387,000 in questionable transactions. But I've only reviewed 12 months in detail. If this pattern continues across all 7 years, we're looking at close to $900,000. I felt sick. Can you prove it? I asked. I can trace the money. I can show the pattern. Whether we can prove criminal intent depends on what else we find. But Mrs. Beaumont, there's something else you should know. What? 3 of these accounts show deposits from other sources. Not just the trust fund. There are wire transfers coming from your personal checking account. Did you authorize those? No. Do you know who has access to your personal accounts? Just me. And Ethan. He's on the signature card. David Rosen wrote something in his notebook. When did you add him? 5 years ago. He said it would make things easier if something happened to me. If I was hospitalized or incapacitated, he could pay my bills, handle emergencies. How much has he withdrawn from your personal accounts? I don't know. I'd have to check. I'd recommend you check tonight. I went home at 5 p.m. Caroline was in the kitchen making dinner. Lily was sitting at the table drawing. She looked up when I walked in, and for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. Hi, Grandma, she whispered. Her voice was small and clear, like a bell. Hi, sweetheart, I said. I went to my office, logged into my personal banking account, started scrolling through transactions. There, a withdrawal from 2 years ago, $15,000. Memo line, home repairs. I hadn't authorized that. I hadn't needed any home repairs. Another one, 6 months later, $8,500. Memo line, medical expenses. I hadn't had any medical expenses that year. Another, $12,000. Legal fees. Another, $20,000. Investment opportunity. I counted them. 12 withdrawals over 5 years. Total, $143,000. I picked up the phone, called my bank. "This is Shirley Beaumont," I said. "I need to remove someone from my checking account signature card." "Certainly, Mrs. Beaumont. Who would you like to remove?" "Ethan Beaumont. I'll need you to come in person to complete the paperwork." "I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning." I hung up, sat in the dark for a while, thinking. Ethan had stolen over $500,000 from the trust, from my personal accounts, money that was supposed to be protected, money that was supposed to take care of this family, and he'd done it while telling me Caroline and Lily were dead. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "Mom, I'm worried about you. Let's have dinner tomorrow night, just the two of us. We need to talk about your health. I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Morrison for Thursday. Cognitive assessment. It's routine for people your age, don't worry." I stared at the message. He was moving faster than I'd expected. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Caroline appeared in the doorway. "Shirley," she said, "are you okay?" "No," I said, "but I will be." "What did you find?" "Everything. He's been stealing from me for years, and now he's trying to have me declared incompetent." Caroline sat down across from me. "What are we going to do?" I looked at her. This woman who'd survived 7 years of poverty and threats. This woman who'd protected my granddaughter when I didn't even know she existed. "We're going to destroy him," I said. That night, at 11:47 p.m., I heard a car in my driveway. I looked out the window. Ethan's black Mercedes. He was just sitting there, engine running, lights off, watching my house. I closed the curtain, checked the locks, made sure Caroline and Lily's bedroom door was closed. Then I went back to my office and kept working. At 2 a.m., the car was still there. The bank manager looked uncomfortable. It was 9 a.m., and I was sitting across from her desk with the signature card paperwork in front of me. "Mrs. Beaumont," she said, "I need to ask you a few questions before we process this change." "Go ahead." "Are you making this decision of your own free will?" "Yes." "Has anyone pressured you or threatened you in any way?" "No." She wrote something down. "I'm required to note that your son visited this branch yesterday afternoon. He expressed concern about your mental state. He asked us to notify him if you attempted to make any changes to your accounts." My chest tightened. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him we can't discuss client information without permission. But Mrs. Beaumont, he's listed as your power of attorney for healthcare decisions. He showed us the paperwork." I felt the room tilt slightly. "I never signed any power of attorney. According to our records, you signed it 2 years ago. Your son filed it with us as part of your estate planning documents." "I need to see it." She pulled a file from her drawer. Inside was a document with my signature at the bottom. The date said March 15th, 2023. I studied the signature carefully. It looked like mine. The M had the little loop I always made. The curve of the B was right. But I didn't remember signing it. "Mrs. Beaumont," the bank manager said gently, "are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine. Your son mentioned you've been having memory problems, confusion. He said you're seeing a specialist this week." "I'm not seeing anyone, and I don't have memory problems." But even as I said it, I felt doubt creeping in. Had I signed that document? Was it possible I'd forgotten? I was 67. People forgot things at my age. Small things. Where they put their keys, what they ate for breakfast, but not this. I wouldn't forget signing away control of my own healthcare. "I want that power of attorney revoked," I said. "I'll need legal documentation for that. A letter from your attorney stating the revocation is valid." "Fine. I'll get it." I left the bank at 10 a.m., drove straight to my lawyer's office. Richard Chen had handled my estate planning for 20 years. He was in court that morning, but his secretary said he could see me at 2 p.m. I went back to my office. Margaret was waiting in my conference room with David Rosen. "Mrs. Beaumont," David said, "we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The original trust documents are missing from your office safe." I felt my stomach drop. "That's impossible. They're in the safe in my office. I have the only key. When was the last time you checked?" I tried to remember. 6 months ago. Maybe longer. "We need those originals to prove the amendments your son made were unauthorized. Without them, he can claim he had your permission for everything." "What about the copies?" "Copies can be disputed. He'll say they were altered. We need the originals with the signatures and witness stamps." I walked to my office, opened the safe. The folder that should have contained the trust documents was empty. In its place was a note in Ethan's handwriting. "Mom, I moved these to the bank safety deposit box for better security. Love, Ethan." No date, no signature, just a note that could have been written yesterday or 5 years ago. "He knew," I said. "He knew we'd look for them." Margaret stood next to me. "Shirley, there's something else. The quarterly board meeting, the one Ethan said you forgot about." "I didn't forget. It was never scheduled." "I know. I checked the calendar. There was no meeting. But Ethan told 3 board members you'd missed it. He said you were becoming unreliable. He suggested they consider a succession plan." "Who did he tell?" "Robert Walsh, Jennifer Park, and Thomas Klein. 3 of my 5 board members. The ones Ethan had relationships with. The ones who'd known him since he was a child." "What did they say?" "They said they'd think about it." I sat down, felt the weight of everything pressing on my chest. Ethan wasn't just stealing money. He was systematically destroying my credibility, making me look incompetent, setting up a scenario where no one would believe me when I finally accused him. "Margaret," I said, "do you think I'm losing my mind?" She looked at me for a long moment. "No, I think your son is a very good liar." That afternoon, I met with Richard Chen. He listened to everything: the fake deaths, the stolen money, the forged power of attorney. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Shirley," he said, "this is going to be difficult to prove. I have the bank records, the payments to Caroline, the withdrawals from my account. And Ethan will say you authorized all of it. He'll say you were helping Caroline voluntarily, that you asked him to manage your finances because you were having trouble keeping track of things. But I wasn't. Can you prove that? Can you point to a single document, a single conversation, where you explicitly denied having memory problems?" I couldn't, because until 3 days ago there was no reason to prove I was competent. Everyone assumed I was. "The power of attorney," I said. "I didn't sign it. The signature looks authentic. I compared it to documents in your file. It's a match." Then he forged it perfectly. "Shirley, listen to me. I've known you for 20 years. I believe you. But if this goes to court, Ethan will bring doctors, experts. He'll paint a picture of a woman in cognitive decline who doesn't remember what she's signed. And he'll be very convincing. So what do I do? We need evidence that you're mentally competent, a psychiatric evaluation from an independent doctor, testimony from people who work with you every day, documentation that you're managing complex business decisions without difficulty." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months." "I don't have months. He's moving faster than that." Richard leaned forward. "Then we need to slow him down. File an injunction preventing him from making any more changes to your accounts or the trust until the competency question is resolved. And if the judge sides with him, then you'll be fighting an uphill battle." I drove home at 5 p.m. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Caroline was at work. She'd gotten a job at a coffee shop near the university. Day shift. She said she wanted to contribute, to not feel like a burden. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when I walked in. "Where's your mom?" I asked. "Working. She'll be home at 7. "Are you okay here by yourself?" "I'm used to it." I sat down across from her, watched her work through math problems. She was in 2nd grade, but the worksheets looked like 4th grade material. "You're smart," I said. "Mom says I get it from you." "Your mom talks about me?" "All the time. She has pictures of you. Old ones. She said you used to be different, happier." I thought about that. When had I stopped being happy? Probably when Harold died 5 years ago. Or maybe before that. Maybe when the business started consuming everything. When family dinners became business meetings. When I stopped asking Ethan about his life and started asking about quarterly projections. "Lily," I said, "do you remember your dad?" She nodded. "He came to see us last week. What did he say?" "He told Mom she should go away again. That you were sick and couldn't help us. That we'd be better off somewhere else." "What did your mom say?" "She said no. She said she was tired of running." I felt something shift in my chest. Caroline had stood up to Ethan. After 7 years of hiding, she'd finally said no. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the signature on the power of attorney, how perfect it looked, how impossible it was to prove it wasn't mine. At 2 a.m., I got up, went to my office, pulled out every document I'd signed in the past 5 years. Tax returns, business contracts, board resolutions. I laid them all on my desk, studied the signatures under the lamp. They all looked the same M, the same B, the same subtle slant to the right, but there, on the power of attorney, the tail of the Y in Shirley. It was slightly different, shorter, less curved. It was so small most people wouldn't notice, but I noticed, because I'd been signing my name for 67 years, and that Y was wrong. I took a picture of it, sent it to Richard Chen with a message. Look at the Y. Then I sat in the dark and thought about what Ethan had told Caroline, that I was sick, that I couldn't help them. He was building a narrative, and if I wasn't careful, everyone would believe it. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. The documents from the bank safety deposit box. Ethan picked them up this morning. He said he needed them for the estate attorney. I'm sorry. I just found out. I called her. Which estate attorney? I don't know. He didn't say. There is no estate attorney. Not for me. I'm not dying. I know. That's why I'm calling. I hung up, sat in the dark. Ethan had the original trust documents. The forged power of attorney was filed at the bank. 3 board members thought I was incompetent. And somewhere out there he was preparing something. Some final move that would lock me out of my own life. I looked at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator. Pictures of grandmothers and granddaughters holding hands. I'd lost 7 years with her. I wasn't losing another day. I called an emergency board meeting for Friday morning. No agenda, no warning, just a message. Attendance mandatory, 8:00 a.m. Margaret helped me prepare. We printed every bank statement, every withdrawal, every suspicious transaction. We organized them in folders with tabs, color-coded, chronological. Are you sure about this? Margaret asked. Once you show them this, there's no going back. I'm sure. Thursday night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with Caroline, going through everything one more time. He's going to deny it, Caroline said. He'll say you authorized the payments, that you knew about me and Lily all along. Let him try. Surely he's good at this. He's been lying for 7 years and no one suspected anything. That's because I wasn't looking. Now I am. At midnight, my phone rang. Ethan. I answered. Mom, he said. His voice was tight, controlled. I heard about the board meeting. Good. What's this about? You'll find out tomorrow. Mom, listen to me. Whatever you're planning, don't do it. You're not thinking clearly. The stress is affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine. Dr. Morrison called me today. He said you missed your appointment. He's concerned about you. I didn't miss anything. I never made an appointment. Yes, you did. I made it for you. You agreed to go. I never agreed to anything. There was a pause. Then his voice changed, softer, more dangerous. Mom, I love you. You know that. Everything I've done has been to protect you, to protect this family. By stealing from me? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know what you think you found, he said. But you're wrong. And tomorrow, in front of the board, you're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to prove that you're not fit to run this company anymore. We'll see. I hung up. Caroline was standing in the doorway. He knows. Good. Let him panic. At 7:30 a.m., I arrived at the office. The board members were already there. Robert Walsh, Jennifer Park, Thomas Klein, and 2 others, Sandra Okoye and James Bradford, the 5 people who controlled the future of my company. Ethan wasn't there yet. Shirley, Robert said. What's this about? Wait for Ethan. I only want to say this once. He arrived at 7:55, walked into the conference room like he owned it, smiled at everyone, poured himself coffee. Morning, Mom, he said. Everyone. I didn't smile back. At exactly 8 I stood up, placed the first folder in front of each board member. 7 years ago, I said. My son told me his wife and newborn daughter died in childbirth. I believed him. I paid for their funeral. I grieved for them. Ethan's smile faltered. 3 days ago, I discovered they're alive. His daughter is 7 years old. His wife has been living in poverty for 7 years while Ethan paid her $800 a month to stay silent. I opened the second folder. Bank statements. This money came from the Beaumont Family Trust. Money that was supposed to be protected. Money that Ethan, as trustee, had a legal obligation to safeguard. Jennifer Park was reading the statements. Her face had gone pale. But that's not all, I continued. Over the past 7 years, Ethan has withdrawn nearly $900,000 from the trust through fraudulent transactions, consulting fees, legal services, property maintenance, all going to shell companies or accounts that don't exist. Thomas Klein looked up. Shirley, these are serious accusations. They're not accusations. They're facts. I have documentation for every transaction. Ethan stood up. His face was red. This is insane. Mom, you're having some kind of episode. You need help. Sit down, I said. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. You're clearly unwell. Everyone can see it. Ethan? Robert said quietly. Sit down. Ethan sat. I opened the third folder. 2 years ago, Ethan forged my signature on a power of attorney document. He filed it with my bank without my knowledge or consent. He's been using it to withdraw money from my personal accounts. $143,000 over 5 years. Sandra Okoye leaned forward. How do you know the signature was forged? I placed 2 documents side by side. One was the power of attorney. One was a contract I'd signed the same month. Look at the Y in Shirley, I said. The tail is different, shorter, less curved. Someone copied my signature but didn't get the details exactly right. James Bradford studied both signatures. He was a retired judge. He knew what to look for. She's right, he said. These aren't the same. Ethan's hands were shaking. This is ridiculous. Mom, you signed that document in my office. I watched you do it. No, I said. I didn't. You're confused. You don't remember. That's why we need to talk about your health. About getting you help. My health is fine. What's not fine is my son stealing from me and then trying to have me declared incompetent so I can't stop him. Robert Walsh cleared his throat. Ethan, is any of this true? Of course not. She's having delusions, paranoid thoughts. I've been trying to help her, but she won't listen. Then explain the bank statements, Jennifer said. Explain the payments to Caroline. I can't, because I don't know what she's talking about. Those statements could be fabricated. She could have created them herself. We can verify them, I said. Call the bank right now. Ask them to pull the records. Fine, Ethan said. Let's call them. I handed him my phone. Go ahead. He stared at it. Didn't move. Call them, I said again. Mom, this is unnecessary. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? You've been stealing from your own mother for 7 years. You faked your daughter's death. You threatened your wife. And now you're trying to gaslight me in front of my board. I never threatened anyone. The conference room door opened. Caroline walked in. Ethan's face went white. Hello, Ethan, Caroline said. He stood up slowly, looked at her like she was a ghost. You remember me? Caroline said. Your wife, the one who supposedly died 7 years ago. This is impossible, Ethan whispered. No, what's impossible is what you did to me, to Lily, to your mother. She placed a small recording device on the table, pressed play. Ethan's voice came through the speaker, clear, unmistakable. If you contact my mother, I will destroy you. I will take Lily. I will have you declared unfit. You'll never see her again. Do you understand me? Caroline's voice shaking. I understand. Good. Here's your money. $800. Same as always. Don't spend it all in one place. The recording stopped. The conference room was silent. Ethan looked around at all of them. His face had gone from red to gray. When did you record this? He asked. Last week, when you came to threaten me. Again, that's illegal. You can't record someone without their consent. Ohio is a one-party consent state, I said. Caroline can record any conversation she's part of. James Bradford was writing notes. Robert Walsh was staring at Ethan like he didn't recognize him. Ethan, Robert said, I think you need to leave. You can't do this to me. I'm her son. You're a thief, Sandra said, and apparently a very convincing liar. Mom, Ethan turned to me. Please, don't do this. You did this, not me. I was trying to protect the family money. That's all. Caroline wanted a divorce. She was going to take half of everything. I couldn't let that happen. So you faked her death? I gave her money. I took care of her. She wasn't suffering. Caroline laughed. A bitter sound. I worked 3 jobs. Lily went hungry. We lived in apartments with no heat. That's not taking care of someone. You could have gotten a better job. I was raising your daughter alone while you lived in a mansion and spent money that wasn't yours. Ethan looked at me one more time. Mom, please, we can fix this. As a family. We're not a family anymore, I said. You made sure of that 7 years ago. Robert stood up. Ethan, you're removed from your position as VP. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't do that. We just did. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Ethan looked at them, at me, at Caroline. Then he walked out. After he left, the board members sat in silence for a long time. Finally, James spoke. Shirley, what do you want to do about the trust? I want a new trustee, someone independent, someone Ethan can't manipulate. We'll arrange it. And I want every dollar accounted for, every fraudulent transaction reversed. It'll take time. I have time. That afternoon, I filed a police report. Fraud, theft, forgery. The detective who took my statement said they'd investigate, said it could take months. I told him I'd wait. At 6 p.m., I went home. Caroline and Lily were making dinner. Spaghetti. Lily's favorite. How did it go? Caroline asked. He's out. The board fired him. What happens now? Now we rebuild. Lily looked up from her homework. Is Dad going to jail? I knelt down next to her. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. He did some very bad things. Will I still see him? Do you want to? She thought about it. Sometimes. Not a lot. But sometimes. Then we'll figure that out. Together. That night, I slept through until morning for the first time in a week. Ethan showed up at my house on Sunday morning. I was in the garden with Lily, teaching her how to plant tulip bulbs for spring. She saw him first. Dad's here, she said quietly. I looked up. He was standing at the edge of the driveway. He looked terrible. Unshaven. His clothes wrinkled. Eyes red. Go inside, I told Lily. Find your mom. She ran into the house. Ethan walked toward me slowly. Mom, please. I need to talk to you. There's nothing to say. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I stood up. Brushed the dirt off my hands. 5 minutes. We sat on the porch steps. He stared at the ground. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. I know that's not enough, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Why did you do it? He was quiet for a long time. The money. It started with the money. Dad left you everything. The trust was supposed to be for both of us, but you controlled it. I was making $60,000 a year as VP. You were sitting on $4 million. So you decided to steal it. I decided to take what should have been mine anyway. And Caroline? Lily? They should have been yours too? He closed his eyes. Caroline wanted a divorce. She found out about the money I'd been taking. She said she was going to tell you. I panicked. So you convinced her to fake her own death. I told her you'd never believe her, that you'd side with me, that she'd lose Lily in a custody battle. I told her if she disappeared, I'd support them. $800 a month. She could start over somewhere new. $800 a month for 7 years. That's $67,000, Ethan. You stole nearly $1 million. I had expenses. The house, the car, maintaining appearances, while your daughter went hungry. I didn't know it was that bad. Caroline never told me, because you threatened her. You said you'd take Lily away. He put his head in his hands. I know I did. I was trying to protect what I'd built. You built it on lies. I know. We sat in silence. I watched a car drive past, heard children playing somewhere down the street. Normal sounds, normal life. Everything mine wasn't anymore. What happens now? He asked. The police are investigating. The district attorney will decide if they want to press charges. Will you tell them not to? I looked at him. This man who used to be my son, who used to bring me dandelions from the yard when he was 5, who used to call me every Sunday. No, I said. I won't. Mom, please, I'll lose everything. My career, my reputation. I could go to prison. You should have thought about that 7 years ago. I was desperate. So was Caroline. But she didn't lie to me. She didn't steal from me. She survived. She hated you. She was always jealous of you. Stop. Don't try to make this her fault. He stood up, started pacing. You don't understand what it was like, growing up as your son. Everyone comparing me to you, asking when I'd be as successful, when I'd build something like you did. So this is my fault? Because I worked hard? No, it's my fault. I know that. But Mom, you have to understand. I felt invisible, like nothing I did would ever be enough. And faking your daughter's death made you feel visible? He stopped pacing. It made me feel in control, for once. You weren't in control. You were terrified. That's why you kept paying Caroline. That's why you tried to have me declared incompetent. Because you knew if anyone found out the truth, you'd lose everything. I'm losing everything anyway. Yes, you are. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Is there anything I can do? Anything that would make you forgive me? I don't know. Maybe, but not today. When? I don't know that either. He walked back to his car, stopped halfway, turned around. Does Lily hate me? He asked. No, she's confused. She doesn't understand why you lied about her being dead. Can I see her? Talk to her? Not alone. Not yet. Maybe in a few months. After things settle. He nodded, got in his car, drove away. I sat on the porch for a long time after he left. Caroline came out eventually, sat next to me. Are you okay? She asked. No, but I will be. What did he say? That he was sorry, that he felt invisible, that he needed control. Do you believe him? I believe he believes it, but I don't think that's the whole truth. What's the whole truth? He's selfish. He saw money he wanted and took it. He saw problems and eliminated them. He didn't think about consequences because he didn't think he'd get caught. What will you do? Let the legal system handle it, and focus on what matters. What's that? You, Lily, rebuilding what he destroyed. Monday morning, Margaret came to my office. She closed the door, locked it. Shirley, she said, there's something I need to tell you. What? Ethan came to see me Friday night. After the board meeting, my stomach dropped. What did he want? He offered me $200,000, said it was a severance package, for my loyalty to the company. In exchange for what? Testifying that you've been showing signs of dementia, that I'd noticed memory problems, confusion, erratic decisions. I felt cold. What did you tell him? I told him to go to hell. Then I recorded the rest of the conversation. She pulled out her phone, played the audio, Ethan's voice. Margaret, please. This is business. Nothing personal. My mother is declining. You've seen it. Everyone has. I'm trying to protect her. Margaret's voice. By bribing me? It's not a bribe. It's compensation for telling the truth. The truth is, your mother is sharper than you'll ever be. The truth is, you're a thief and a liar. She's turned you against me. No, Ethan. You did that yourself. The recording ended. I'm taking this to the police, Margaret said. Attempted bribery, witness tampering, whatever charges they can file. Margaret, no, this ends. He doesn't get to do this to you, to anyone. She left before I could respond. That afternoon, the police called. They were ready to move forward with charges. Fraud, theft, forgery, possibly bribery depending on Margaret's statement. How long until trial? I asked. 6 months, maybe longer. These cases take time. Will he go to prison? If convicted, probably. We're talking about nearly $1 million. That's serious time. I hung up, sat at my desk, thought about Ethan in prison, about Lily growing up knowing her father was a criminal. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Beaumont? A woman's voice. This is Dr. Sarah Morrison. I'm a psychiatrist. Your son scheduled an appointment for you last week. I know, I didn't agree to it. I understand. But Mrs. Beaumont, I'd like to offer you a complimentary evaluation anyway. Not because I think there's anything wrong, but because having documentation of your mental competency will help your case. How much does that cost? Nothing. Consider it a professional courtesy. I've seen what your son tried to do. It's unconscionable. 2 weeks later, I had the evaluation. 3 hours of tests. Memory. Reasoning. Problem solving. Dr. Morrison reviewed the results in her office. Mrs. Beaumont, she said, your cognitive function is above average for your age. There is no evidence of any decline whatsoever. Will you put that in writing? I already have. I'm sending copies to your attorney and the district attorney. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Ethan called that night. Mom, I heard about the charges. Please, don't let them do this. It's out of my hands. No, it's not. You can tell them to drop it. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. You stole from me. You lied to me. You tried to destroy me. I'm your son. I know. That's what makes it so much worse. I hung up, blocked his number, sat in the quiet of my house and waited for whatever came next. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the courtroom every day. Caroline sat next to me. Lily stayed with a neighbor. Ethan wore a suit I'd bought him 2 years ago. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. He didn't look at me once during the entire trial. The prosecutor presented everything: bank records, forged signatures, Caroline's testimony, the recording of Ethan threatening her, Margaret's recording of the bribery attempt. Ethan's lawyer tried to argue that I'd given verbal permission for the withdrawals, that I'd known about Caroline all along, that I was vindictive and unstable. Then, Dr. Morrison took the stand, explained her evaluation, showed the test results, made it clear my mind was completely sound. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Ethan looked at me then, finally. His face was blank, empty, like something inside him had broken. I felt nothing. At the sentencing hearing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up. Your Honor, I said, Ethan is my son. I raised him. I loved him. I thought I knew him. But the man sitting in this courtroom is a stranger to me. He stole nearly $1 million from his own family. He faked his daughter's death. He threatened his wife. He tried to have me declared incompetent so he could steal more. I don't know what happened to the boy I raised, but whoever he became, he needs to face the consequences of his choices. I sat down. The judge looked at Ethan. Mr. Beaumont, do you have anything to say? Ethan stood slowly. I'm sorry. To my mother. To Caroline. To Lily. I thought I was protecting my future. Instead, I destroyed it. I deserve whatever punishment you give me. The judge nodded. Ethan Beaumont, you are sentenced to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years probation. You will repay $873,000 in restitution to the Beaumont Family Trust and $143,000 to Shirley Beaumont personally. You are permanently removed as trustee of any family assets. 4 years. Ethan would be 50 when he got out. He was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once. Our eyes met. I didn't look away. After the sentencing, Caroline and I drove to the cemetery, the plot where I'd buried the 2 white coffins 7 years ago. We stood in front of the headstones. Caroline Ann Beaumont, baby girl Beaumont. What do we do with these? Caroline asked. Take them down. They were always a lie. The cemetery manager arranged for removal the next day. The plot would stay empty. A permanent reminder of what Ethan had taken from us. 3 months later, the trust was fully restructured. A new trustee. An independent firm with no connection to the family. They reviewed every transaction, recovered what they could, and set up new protocols to prevent fraud. The final accounting showed Ethan had stolen $16,000 over 7 years. Some of it was gone forever. Spent. Disappeared. But the court had ordered restitution. Ethan's house was sold, his car, his possessions. Everything liquidated to pay back what he could. It wouldn't be enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. I restructured my will. 70% of my estate to Lily, held in trust until she turned 25. 20% to Caroline. 10% split between scholarships for single mothers and a fund for survivors of financial abuse. Ethan would receive nothing. Caroline got a better job, office manager at a medical practice, good benefits, stable hours. She and Lily moved into a small house 2 miles from mine, close enough to visit, far enough to have their own life. Lily started therapy, twice a week, learning to process what her father had done, learning that it wasn't her fault. She asked about him sometimes. Can I write him a letter? Yes, if you want to. Will he write back? I don't know. She wrote the letter, mailed it to the prison. 3 weeks later, a response came. Lily read it in her room, came out crying. Caroline held her. What did he say? I asked. He said he loves me. He said he's sorry. He said he understands if I don't want to see him. What do you want? I don't know yet. That was okay. She had time to figure it out. 6 months after the sentencing, I retired from the company, handed control to the board, stayed on as advisor but stepped back from daily operations. I was 68 years old. I'd spent 43 years building that company. It was time to build something else. I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping elderly people who'd been victims of financial exploitation. People whose children or caretakers had stolen from them, people who felt invisible and helpless. I told them my story, showed them it was possible to fight back, to reclaim their lives. Margaret joined me. We made a good team. 1 year after the trial, Lily asked if she could visit Ethan in prison. Caroline and I drove her there, waited in the parking lot. She was inside for 30 minutes. When she came out, her face was red from crying. How was it? Caroline asked. Sad. He looks different, older. What did you talk about? He asked about school, about Grandma, about you. I told him we're okay. He cried. How do you feel? I don't know. He's still my dad, but he's also the person who hurt you. Hurt Grandma. I don't know how to feel about that. You don't have to figure it out today, I said. We drove home in silence. 2 years after the sentencing, Ethan was eligible for parole. The board denied it. Said he hadn't shown enough remorse. Needed more time. 3 years after the sentencing, he tried again. This time, they approved it. Good behavior. Completed therapy. Showed genuine change. He was released on a Thursday in March. He called me from a halfway house. Mom, he said, I'm out. I know. Can I see you? Please? Not yet. When? I don't know. I'm different now. I've changed. I've been in therapy for 3 years. I understand what I did wrong. That's good. But understanding isn't the same as earning forgiveness. How do I earn it? I don't know if you can. 6 months later, he called again. Mom, I got a job. Warehouse work. Loading trucks. It's not much, but it's honest. Good. I'm paying back the restitution. $200 a month. It'll take me 30 years, but I'll do it. Okay. Can I see Lily? I talked to Caroline, to Lily, to the therapist. They agreed to supervised visits, once a month, in a public place. The first visit was at a park. Caroline, Lily, and I sat at a picnic table. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, stood at a distance until Lily waved him over. He sat across from us, looked at his daughter. Hi, Lily, he said. Hi, Dad. You got taller. I'm 10 now. I know. I'm sorry I missed so much. Me too. They talked for 30 minutes. Awkward, careful, like strangers learning each other's language. When the visit ended, Ethan stood up, looked at me. Thank you, he said, for letting me see her. Don't thank me. Thank Caroline. She's the one who agreed to this. He turned to Caroline. Thank you. She nodded, didn't smile. We drove home. Lily was quiet. Are you okay? I asked. I think so. It was weird, seeing him. Do you want to do it again? Maybe. In a few weeks. That night, I sat on my porch, watched the sunset, thought about everything that had happened since that blizzard 3 years ago. I'd lost a son, but I'd gained a granddaughter. I'd learned who I could trust. I'd learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to stand beside you when everything falls apart. Caroline came out, sat next to me. You're thinking about him, she said. Yes. Do you miss him? The person he was before? Sometimes. But I'm not sure that person ever really existed. Maybe I just wanted to believe he did. Will you ever forgive him? I don't know. Forgiveness feels like something that happens to you, not something you decide. Maybe one day I'll wake up and it'll be there, or maybe it won't. That's okay too. We sat in comfortable silence, watched the stars come out. I was 69 years old. I had a company I'd built, a granddaughter I'd found, a life I'd reclaimed. Ethan was working in a warehouse, paying back money he'd stolen, seeing his daughter once a month under supervision. He'd lost everything, and I'd made sure of it. That wasn't revenge. It was justice. And justice, I'd learned, was the only kind of peace worth having.